Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we are back again with an update to the tier list. This month it's coming a bit later because we got our hands to the new champions slightly later, and there are several promotions, some demotions as well on the tier list based on the recent contents that have been coming out, with Eternity of Pain, with Act 8.1 already factored in it, obviously Battlegrounds, surprises even to a degree, so on and so forth. So before we get any further, a couple of disclaimers. Number one, everybody always misses this, but there is a separate list for 5 stars that is actually about to get slightly changed because Scarlet Witch now is available as 6-star, and we're going to be putting her in the useful tier. So that's going to be the part of the first disclaimer. Champions that are available 6 stars are in this list. If champions not available to 6-star, they have a separate list below. And most important disclaimer, that this list is a mixture of my personal view of the game as well as current game relevance and trends. Please do not use this list as a point of argument, but more as a food for thought. Each summoner has different needs and preferences that far outweigh the importance on where any champion lands on any list. Please rank champions that will help you get the content done that you are trying to do, and not blindly follow this list. I always advocate for goal-orientated rank ups, as in if you need help with Alliance or defense, rank up somebody for Alliance or defense. If you need help with Alliance quest, rank up somebody for Alliance quest. If you need help with Alliance War or Battlegrounds, rank up champions for Alliance or Battlegrounds or whatever else you want for specific story content or whatever else. Because the idea is you use rank up resources to complete the content, to earn more rank up resources and be able to rank up the next champion quicker. Right, all that being said, let's take a look at the initial release new champions. And there we go. Titania is at the moment in useful tier, which is where majority of the new champions land. I actually have a much more optimistic view on Titania than most people around. In reality, I kind of want to put her in a frequently useful tier, and I do hope to pull her as a 6-star as soon as possible when the new featured 6-star crystal comes out, because I do think she might be excellent for Alliance War and for Battlegrounds specifically. She's not a long-form content kind of champion, but I do think in between her immunity to buffs, in between her access to tons of debuffs and relatively decent mid-fight damage, I think she can definitely be very worthwhile champion to have. At the same time, there are obviously specific fears about Titania, how and where she's going to fit in the game, whether she's going to be potent and useful enough when she has to compete with champions like Spider-Man 2099 and Quicksilver. And I'll be honest, I don't think she's necessarily as good as Quicksilver or Spider-Man 2099 in majority of situations, which is reflected in her ranking, and she has quite a lot to prove yet. But at the same time, I do think there's something to her. I think it will take very clever players to bring out the best of Titania, and over time I hope to see her putting in more work so I can push her higher on this list where she lands. But again, there's absolutely nothing wrong landing in the useful tier. Again, for those of you who haven't normally watched my tier list, top of the game is basically the best of the best champions. Champions that, you know, when you pull, you should rank, and if you can use him and if you like them, obviously. And the champions that basically dominate majority of the game modes. Wherever you go, you'll always see Archangel putting in work in Alliance War. You can use Archangel in Alliance Quest if you want. He's doing ton of things in questing. He frequently can do some EOP or difficult boss fights, so on and so forth. That's the type of champion we're talking about. Meta is just a touch below. Those are, meta stands for most effective tactics available in the game. And here, again, it means that largely in most of the game modes, these champions will do well. Perhaps not in as many game modes as the champions that are in top of the game, but it typically means that these champions have very, very established dominant positions across the content. Frequently useful, again, is just as it sounds. Champions that are very valuable, champions that have tons of uses, champions that are not necessarily the champions that you will go to as your first option for any of the obstacles, but when situation comes, they are frequently very good at dealing with specific nodes, specific problems, specific matchups. Useful is just like a little bit less of that, champions that have their use, champions that can do interesting and worthwhile and valuable things. And at the same time, those are the champions that, again, pretty much never will be your go-to options for almost anything in this game. But at the same time, if they are, then that's perfectly fine, but it is typically driven by preference rather than them being the most effective champions for the situations. Occasionally useful, absolutely nothing wrong with this tier. You can find a lot of defenders in this tier, for instance. You can find a lot of really, really fun champions, kind of like niche people's specific favorites. Like one of my favorites champions in the entire game is Carnage. Absolute blast to play, but realistically, he's just not that useful. You know, you don't use Carnage in Alliance Quest, Alliance War, and Battlegrounds for high tiers and stuff like that. It's cool. There are times when he can do some useful and cool things in specific questing situations and so on and so forth. But in most of the game modes, these champions aren't necessarily the top of the hill type of champs. That being said, again, nothing wrong with liking and enjoying those champions. Like Mordo is, you know, a champion that I absolutely love using recently. Man-Thing has always been one of my personal favorites. I have a rank 3 Man-Thing as well. Obviously, primarily for Battlegrounds defense, but I absolutely love using him offensively too. And a ton of very fun and interesting champions here. And now we have useless, borderline unplayable, or irrelevant here. It's basically the champions that need a buff, and champions that, you know, you'd most of the time kind of frown pulling. Vast majority of the players don't waste their time, energy, resource, or catalysts on these, and rightfully so. Especially offensively. Again, I do have champions like rank 3 Korg, for instance, and a handful of others, but that's pretty much exclusively for defense, because this is primarily offensive type of list. But here we are. So let's break it down. So we discussed Titania, and now we need to discuss Infamous Iron Man. I'm putting him in the frequently useful tier, which is pretty much the highest tier I ever give to new champions arriving in the game. Because meta and top of the game means those champions have already established themselves, have proved themselves to be viable and useful and important for specific game modes. New champions can't do that. But at the same time, I do think Infamous Iron Man is going to end up in meta tier eventually once he becomes more available. But I do not think he is as strong, as valuable, as good as original Dr. Doom. I do think that, comparatively speaking, Infamous Iron Man, or iDoom, has a lot more weaknesses. There are far more champions that beat this guy easily, so he's overall not going to be as valuable, as dangerous as a defender. And offensively, he has way more holes or problems as well. Now, he does control fights very well, but again, you do need to be aware of opponents with shock immunity. Unlike Dr. Doom, you know, he can still do shock immune champs. He can do incinerate immune champs. He has plenty of raw damage in that kit. Infamous Iron Man does not. At the same time, when fighting, again, there is more to that than just the shock immunity, obviously. Champions with a lot of buffs, for instance, aren't going to be very plausible for Infamous Iron Man. So on and so forth. And again, when facing off against Infamous Iron Man, only thing you have to do is get rid of that armor up buff via armor break, via nullify, via some sort of venom omnom mechanic, or you just bring in a champion with like 4 active buffs, and basically he doesn't get his aura pretty much ever, and there's nothing to worry about. And there's just, again, or bring in shock immune champion, and that aura means very little as is. So what I'm trying to say is, Infamous Iron Man, from where I'm looking at, has far more weaknesses than OG Doom has, and he is not capable in doing as many matchups as OG Doom has. At the same time, I do think that he can rival the potential of OG Doom when it comes to the control of the fight, when he works. And keep in mind that just because you have many champions that you can't destroy, and there are many champions that will destroy you, doesn't mean that the champion is bad. As a great comparison example here is Archangel. There are tons of champions in this game that Archangel cannot fight against. You only need, like, you know, bleed immunity or poison immunity, and Archangel is significantly weakened, not to mention some other more unique abilities. And he's useless on defense. But at the same time, when he works so well that none of that stuff really matters. And when you can use Archangel, he's pretty much always going to be one of the better options. Same thing could happen with Infamous Iron Man, but he has to prove that yet. I can see Infamous Iron Man being useful for Alliance War. I can see him being useful for Battlegrounds, which is very, very important to me. So I do think he's going to be a good champion. At the same time, I don't think he's going to be completely dominating whatever game mode he ends up in. But who knows? I might be proven wrong. So Infamous Iron Man at the moment is about as high as I am willing to place him in the frequently useful tier. Moving on to the changes, I have added Gallon to the top of the game because that kind of becomes obvious already, even though he's very rare champion and not many people have. But he's pretty much joining Human Torch and Archangel in Battlegrounds to the auto-ban selection, because whenever you see Gallon, you should pretty much run, so you can nuke down most of the champs in like 1 or 2 level 1s. Alliance War, if me bringing in a 5-star Gallon to a tier 1 top 10 Alliance War in season doesn't prove that he's a beast in Alliance War, I don't think what will, because he's an absolute monster for Alliance War. He's very, very viable in Alliance Quest and incursions and general questing situations. And he's still subject to balancing. We do need to keep that in mind. We do not know whether he will or will not get balanced. But if he remains in the game as is, I am all but certain he's going to be one of the best champions in the game. And that's why he's at top of the game right now. That being said, we have another promotion, Omega Sentinel and Nimrod. I felt kind of filthy having Nimrod at top of the game and Omega Sentinel at meta. And I do feel that both of them are almost equally good. And I do feel that Omega Sentinel is proving herself in War. She's being more and more frequently used in War, in questing. She's doing a ton of important work in Battlegrounds. She's also very powerful. So I did put up Omega Sentinel to the highest tier. Any other changes? Reintro got a promotion to meta. Reintro has been just positively impressing pretty much everybody, offensively and defensively. One of the most potent Battleground champions at the moment. Absolute defensive powerhouse and tank, and also a neutralized offensive force to be reckoned with for Alliance War attack, for Alliance Quest, and a whole bunch of different situations. Very tanky, very safe, very unique character, and definitely growing in popularity day by day, without a doubt. So Reintro received a promotion, and that was kind of equivalent exchange promotion for Longshot. Longshot dropped down a tier, because I do think that Longshot is very, very capable in Battlegrounds and a bunch of other places, but ultimately he's still not anywhere close to being as kind of like dominant or frequently useful or used by as many people as, for instance, Reintro is. Sorcerer Supreme actually is an interesting one. I'm thinking of probably moving Sorcerer Supreme down a bit and most likely putting Hood up higher, because Hood has been doing very, very cool things. Let me know what you guys think about that change, because Sorcerer Supreme, in my opinion, partially because of her kind of like slowness in Battlegrounds, is not getting attention recently at all, but Hood is just continuing to shine more and more and more bright. Another promotion has been Black Cat. I think Black Cat has been, again, one of those champions that kind of came out of sidelines. And the story about Black Cat, and many people will disagree with me here, and it's okay. If you don't see it the same way, it's not a problem. But I think all the CCP videos did a major, major, major disservice to Black Cat. All of those, oh my god, this record broken, this crazy damage in Labyrinth, and other videos, kind of made Black Cat appear much more one-dimensional as she is, and not enough got emphasized on her utility. And even in the pursuit of the highest damage possible, where people basically created the impression that you have to punish opponents' special attacks and heavy attacks with your own heavy attacks and start playing Black Cat like Tiger in order to get the absolute every last drop of damage out of her, it's just wrong. You really don't. Only thing you have to really do in order to get phenomenal results out of Black Cat is build up to your level 2, and on your way doing so, punish one heavy special attack or land one intercept. which is, you know, again, something that you normally do anyways. When an opponent uses special attack, just go in and punish that, get that card back on you and drop your level 2, and you're going to have very, very good results as is. And then with her ability accuracy reduction capabilities, which are much more potent playing that way because it involves a lot less risk, she just destroys things. She's one of the better Hulkling counters in Battlegrounds, for instance. She destroys Nick Fury, she destroys things, she has been useful for a ton of parts in 8.1, and I fully expect to see Black Cat more and more and more, and to a point where I wouldn't be surprised if I promote her next month again, because again, with her, yeah, I think kind of like the full-on CCP PR department kind of overdid it, overcomplicated the appearance of the character. They overemphasized the damage and where you should go with Black Cat, and, you know, Labyrinth and Abyss and all that other stuff. And I think most of the people just kind of, you know, put Black Cat in a specific box and didn't really look at her afterwards. And I'm paying a lot of attention to her right now. I'm playing with her a ton, and she's just being an absolute beast. So I do think she fully deserves this frequently useful title, and potentially could even get a promotion. And another promotion that we have is Gore. Gore, that might be a bit more of a personal promotion, but I do think that over time, especially in the first Battlegrounds meta, I kind of proved how good Gore is with his Undermine debuff, completely shutting down unblockables, with his damage output, ton of debuffs on opponent, good fight finishing speed, and absolute menace on defense if opponents do not have like a Mystic champion at hand. So I think Gore definitely got underestimated as he got added to the contest, and even for the fights where he should not be particularly great, as in like in Battlegrounds, because it's all mainly about speed and he's not the speediest starter, he does much better than most people thought. So Gore, definitely in my opinion, frequently useful. One more champion that I am thinking of promoting in near future is Silver Surfer, because he has been just doing better and better in more content in 8.1 in Battlegrounds and pretty much everywhere. He's one of my most used AQ champions as well, so don't be surprised if Silver Surfer gets a promotion too. And as for the rest of the champions, I think I left most of them as is. I put Ant-Man in useful. I think that is slightly higher than it used to be. And yeah, the rest of them are pretty much as they were before. Keep in mind, this is just my personal opinion. Let me know what you guys think of the changes. What would you change about my tier list? Why? Most importantly, just don't say like, you know, Cherax deserves to be in meta or something like that. Just like, tell me why. And, you know, be constructive about these things. And I'll listen to it. I enjoy listening to other people's opinions. And yeah, that is it for this one. And I'm going to catch you guys later. See ya. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the next